Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Anna.
And I'm Brian. Today, we're diving into a topic that is constantly being celebrated and simultaneously criticized: self-love. For decades, it's been plagued by the stigma that it's inherently selfish. We want to challenge that notion and dissect the difference between genuine self-love and simple egoism.
It's fascinating how loaded that term is. When you hear self-love, many people instantly conjure up an image of narcissism, indulgence, or ignoring the needs of others. They equate prioritizing oneself with a profound moral failing.
That historical association comes from a misunderstanding rooted in certain societal norms, particularly those that valorize self-sacrifice, martyrdom, and placing the collective good or the family unit above all else. In those frameworks, any attention paid to the self is seen as a diversion of resources and energy from others.
We need to clearly define our terms, though. When we talk about self-love, we are not talking about narcissism. Narcissism is characterized by an excessive need for admiration, a disregard for others' feelings, and an inflated sense of self-importance. Narcissists often have a deep-seated fragility. Their love is conditional on external validation.
Precisely. Genuine self-love is an unconditional acceptance of oneself, flaws, failures, and strengths included. It's an internal state of appreciation that doesn't rely on outside applause. It's quiet competence and acceptance.
Self-love is the psychological foundation that allows you to function sustainably. It encompasses self-care, boundary setting, and self-compassion. If you look at it through the lens of psychology, it's a prerequisite for mental health, not a symptom of pathology.
Think of the classic airplane analogy. You're always instructed to secure your own oxygen mask before assisting others. That isn't selfish, it's pragmatic. If you run out of oxygen, you become a liability to everyone around you. Self-love is securing your own emotional and mental oxygen mask.
If you are constantly depleted, running on fumes, and neglecting your own fundamental needs, sleep, nutrition, emotional processing, you are not operating from a place of strength when you offer help. You are operating from a place of scarcity.
And that help given from scarcity often comes with strings attached. Resentment builds. You start keeping an internal ledger of how much you've sacrificed for others, and you expect repayment. That's where the cycle of codependence begins.
Self-love cuts that cycle. It allows you to give generously and freely because your cup is full. You're not looking for the recipient to validate your worth or replenish your energy. You did that work yourself.
The societal pressure, however, is immense. We are constantly barraged with images of people who are doing it all: the successful career, the perfect family, the intense fitness regimen. That fuels the belief that taking time for oneself is a weakness or a luxury rather than essential maintenance.
We need to normalize the understanding that self-love is preventative care. It's the daily work that keeps you from burnout, exhaustion, and chronic stress. It's an act of responsibility to your future self and, critically, to everyone who relies on you.
It transforms the conversation from, "Is this selfish?" to, "Is this sustainable?" And the answer is invariably no. Continuous self-sacrifice is not sustainable. It always results in breakdown. Welcome back. Let's delve into the actual psychological mechanics. The opposite of self-love is often self-criticism, which triggers a profound stress response in the brain.
When we engage in harsh self-criticism, we activate the body's threat defense system. Our cortisol levels spike, our heart rate increases, and we enter fight or flight mode. This biological reaction is identical to the stress caused by external danger.
Constant self-criticism essentially keeps the body in a state of chronic stress. This has devastating long-term effects on physical health, including immune function, sleep quality, and mood regulation. It makes us less resilient and less available to others.
Self-compassion, the cornerstone of self-love, is the antidote. Pioneering work by researchers like Dr. Kristen Neff shows that self-compassion involves three components: mindfulness, common humanity, and self-kindness.
Mindfulness means acknowledging your suffering without judgment. Common humanity means recognizing that failure, imperfection, and hardship are part of the shared human experience. You are not alone.
And self-kindness means treating yourself with the same warmth, care, and understanding you would offer a close friend who was struggling. This simple act, shifting your inner dialogue, has been shown to lower cortisol and activate the brain's soothing system.
When you are soothed and stable internally, you are better equipped to handle external chaos and the needs of others. Therefore, an act of self-compassion is, indirectly, an investment in your capacity for empathy.
This leads us directly to the function of boundaries. True self-love is the ability to recognize and communicate your limits. Boundaries are not walls intended to keep people out. They are property lines intended to define where your responsibility ends and theirs begins.
A lack of boundaries is often celebrated as generosity or extreme helpfulness, but it's actually a sign of poor self-worth. You are afraid that saying no will lead to rejection or criticism, so you overcommit to earn approval.
And that overcommitment leads to inevitable depletion. When you are depleted, you inevitably become resentful toward the people you overextended yourself for. The irony is that the failure to set a boundary out of fear of conflict often leads to much greater conflict down the line.
The person who practices self-love can say no calmly and kindly with clear reasoning and without guilt. They are protecting their resources, which allows them to say yes wholeheartedly when they truly have the bandwidth to help.
The result is that the yes giving by a self-loving person is genuine, energetic, and free of passive-aggressive resentment. That is far more selfless gift than a resentful, grudging yes given by someone who is already empty.
Self-love, therefore, teaches us to maintain personal integrity and clear limits as the most responsible way to engage with the world. It's a sustainable form of benevolence.
We often encounter self-love being dismissed as lazy or counterproductive in highly achievement-driven cultures. The myth is that taking time for rest or internal processing is a waste of time that should be spent doing.
This is the toxic manifestation of the hustle culture. It promotes the idea that one's worth is inextricably tied to one's output, measurable by hours worked, emails sent, or milestones achieved. Rest is seen as a moral failing.
But neuroscience and productivity studies consistently prove that sustained focus work is impossible without adequate rest. The brain needs consolidation time. Deep work requires periods of diffuse thinking, which often happens during walks, breaks, or sleep.
Therefore, an act of self-love, such as taking a walk, meditating, or simply sitting quietly, is not a distraction from productivity. It is a vital input for high-quality output. It's an investment in cognitive function.
The self-loving person recognizes that quality trumps quantity. They know that running themselves into the ground leads to sloppy work, increased mistakes, and inevitable burnout. They prioritize focused, high-impact periods over long stretches of distraction-ridden exhaustion.
This leads to a massive recalibration of value. Self-love teaches you that your inherent value as a human being is not dependent on your career success, your bank account balance, or your physical appearance. Your worth is unconditional.
This distinction is revolutionary because it frees people from the constant need to prove their value externally. When your value is internal and secure, you approach interactions differently.
You are no longer dependent on external people, a spouse, a child, a boss, to fill a void. You approach relationships from a place of wholeness, not neediness. You are attracted to people for who they are, not for what they can do for you.
In the context of relationships, this means you can offer genuine support without being emotionally enmeshed or controlling. You can allow others to experience their own struggles without feeling the need to fix or rescue them, because your identity isn't tied up in their state of happiness.
The self-sacrificing person often creates codependent relationships. because their sense of purpose is tied to the other person's need. The self-loving person fosters independence and autonomy in their partners and children.
That's why true self-love is arguably one of the most benevolent gifts you can give to your family and friends. You're giving them a healthy, independent person who can stand on their own 2 feet, rather than a depleted partner who needs constant reassurance or validation.
It's a long-term investment in relational health, ensuring that the foundation is sound and that the relationship is based on genuine appreciation, not mutual neediness or obligation.
So let's make this actionable. Self-love isn't just a grand philosophical concept, it's a series of small, daily, practical choices. What does it look like on a day-to-day basis?
It starts with the absolute basics. Physical self-care. This is non-negotiable. Getting adequate sleep, eating nourishing food, and moving your body are not luxuries. They are fundamental inputs required for mental stability.
And it requires discipline to protect those inputs. It means saying no to the late-night social engagement when you know you need sleep. It means choosing the healthier meal even if the less healthy option is easier. It is a series of small, self-respecting choices.
Another critical daily ritual is mindful time out. This can be 5 minutes of meditation, deep breathing, or simply sitting in silence without a phone. The goal is to disconnect from external stimulation and check in with your internal emotional state.
This simple checking in prevents emotional overwhelm. You notice the stress building before it explodes into anxiety or anger. You are managing your internal climate proactively.
And daily self-compassion practices. When you inevitably make a mistake or feel frustrated, consciously shift your inner dialogue. Instead of, I'm so stupid for doing that, try, that was difficult and I'm learning. What would I say to a friend in this situation?
Another huge daily act of self-love is digital detoxing. We are constantly consuming external information, news, social media, other people's curated lives. This bombardment erodes self-worth and clarity. Protecting pockets of time, especially morning and evening, from screen time is vital.
The key is to schedule these things with the same seriousness you schedule a client meeting. You wouldn't skip a client meeting, so don't skip your hour of protected time for exercise or deep work. You are making a commitment to yourself.
And for those struggling with the stigma of feeling selfish, start small. Start by giving yourself permission to leave one thing undone or delegate one task you don't need to do yourself. Observe the result. Did the world end? Did your loved ones hate you? The answer is almost certainly no.
The fear of being selfish is often far greater than the actual consequences of prioritizing a healthy boundary. You need to consciously challenge that assumption through small acts of self-prioritization.
True self-love is about consistency, not perfection. It's not about taking a luxurious spa day once a year. It's about the small, daily commitment to respecting your own needs. It is the steady drip that fills the well.
We've focused heavily on the individual psychology, but the stigma around self-love is deeply systemic. Society often demands self-sacrifice from specific groups, particularly women and caregivers.
Historically, the value proposition for women in many cultures was tied to their ability to nurture, serve, and prioritize the family unit above their own ambitions or needs. The notion of a woman prioritizing her own creative or professional pursuits was often viewed as a dereliction of duty, the height of selfishness. This systemic pressure creates what we call the martyrdom trap. People, especially caregivers, can feel like their identity and self-worth are tied to being perpetually needed and perpetually exhausted. Admitting fatigue or setting a boundary feels like giving up their identity.
And this ties into the capitalist pressure of the hustle culture we discussed. The economic system profits from employees who feel compelled to overwork, skip breaks, and constantly chase external validation through their careers. Self-love is, in some ways, an act of resistance against those systems.
If you are a self-loving person, you are less likely to fall for the pressure of consumerism, which often feeds off dissatisfaction and comparison. When you are internally secure, you don't need external purchases to validate your worth.
You also pose a challenge to poorly managed workplaces. A self-loving employee is more likely to speak up about unfair workloads, demand clear boundaries, and refuse to participate in toxic, energy-draining work environments. They value their integrity more than their fear of conflict.
The long-term societal shift, therefore, requires a reframing of what we deem good behavior. We need to move from valorizing the stressed, exhausted, self-sacrificing hero to celebrating the healthy, sustainable, and well-boundaried contributor.
We need to teach children from a young age that recognizing and articulating their needs is a sign of strength and emotional intelligence, not a symptom of selfishness. That simple reframing can break decades of systemic pressure.
And as adults, we need to actively celebrate self-love when we see it in others. When a friend cancels a commitment because they are overwhelmed and need rest, we should respond with genuine validation, not disappointment or passive-aggressive guilt. That collective validation is what will eventually dismantle the societal stigma. Self-love is a revolutionary act that promotes resilience, mental health, and ultimately makes us better citizens and better relational partners.
To conclude, let's synthesize our argument. Self-love is not selfishness. It is the ultimate, necessary form of benevolence.
The person who practices self-love becomes a lighthouse, not a leaking ship. They are a reliable source of light and stability for others because their energy is consistently replenished.
When you practice self-compassion, you are modeling for everyone around you, your children, your colleagues, your partner, how to treat themselves kindly. That modeling is an invaluable, selfless gift.
When you set healthy boundaries, you are teaching people how they can treat you respectfully. You are defining the standard of engagement, which promotes clarity and honesty in all your relationships.
The long-term impact of choosing self-love over self-sacrifice is a life lived from a position of integrity and wholeness. Your yes is genuine, and your no is respectful.
And the world needs more people operating from a position of wholeness. It needs stable, resilient, compassionate individuals who are not reliant on external circumstances or other people to validate their existence.
The cycle of true benevolence begins with the individual act of securing your own oxygen mask. Self-love is that mask. It is responsible, it is necessary, and it is the furthest thing from selfish.
It is the foundation for a sustainable, meaningful, and genuinely generous life. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into self-love.
We'll be back next week to explore the ethics of self-forgiveness.
Goodbye for now.